Hello and welcome to the 7th Brumaire Livestream. This is Karl Marx's 18th Brumaire of Louis Napoleon livestream. We are in our 7th episode. We are halfway through chapter 4 and we have just a small panel today, but high in talent. Very, very high in talent. You know, China has nothing on this. Now,
what?
So
I can make a fucking virus, Tom.
You are.
What you saying?
You are the virus, Ezri. Okay.
Aww,
now,
so sweet.
It's so sweet. Now, let's introduce Ezri. Ezri, coming from Connecticut. How's it going?
Not for long. Doing great. I'm packing my room into little hot swappable units, and I'm booking cars across the country. Shit's going.
Are you going to bring books with you? Or are you going to leave them there?
I'm going to bring the fucking books. I'm bringing the... Well, here's the thing. My car is in the threshold of too broken to drive across the country, but not like broken enough to just sell because it would be too expensive to fix, like in general. So I'm having it shipped. I'm bringing it with, but I'm not driving it. So yeah, I'll just stuff a bunch of books in that.
Fair enough. And then all the way up north, we've got Kyle. Kyle, how's it going?
All right. It's been rainy and cloudy and kind of, just almost English here, but I am persevering.
And tell us, have you watched any good cookery shows lately?
I haven't. I've exhausted the supply. Well, I could move on to the Italian Nailed It, but I haven't got there yet. I've been watching Naked for You, which is always a good parody of the petty bourgeoisie.
What is it? Naked for You.
Nathan for You.
What's
it's a old Comedy Central show about a comedian who graduated from business school and who goes around to these petty bourgeois businesses and offers them marketing advice, which is always terrible and extremely awkward. If you want some good sort of satire of business school speak and consulting and petty bourgeois nonsense, then check it out.
Sounds good. I've been watching recently Justified. Somebody asked in the chat what happened to Varn. I said he hurt his back, and then we got this. He fell down some stairs, huh, Tom? Surprisingly close to the truth,
You fuck with MMT, you get the horns.
You get the horns, baby. You get the horns.
No.
Right.
Get well soon, Derek.
Get well soon is right. Okay, let's hit into this. Last week, we had gone halfway through the rise of Louis Bonaparte, chapter 4, and we just gone through the part where the Marx was talking about how the bourgeois, the Party of Order, started condemning everything as socialism. You want to have a train, that's socialism. If you want to have workers' rights, socialism. If you want to do anything, socialism. So in that line, which sounds so familiar to our politics of today, everything is goddamn socialism, even if it's just even if it's not. I suppose that's the best way of saying it. I'm going to read a little bit here and see how we get on. Let's finish off this. Let's just finish this paragraph here, put it in context. Thus, by now stigmatizing as socialistic what it had previously extolled as liberal, the bourgeoisie confessed that its own interests dictate that it should be delivered from the danger of its own rule. That, to restore tranquility in the country, its bourgeois parliament must, first of all, be given its quietus. That to preserve its social power intact, its political power must be broken. That the individual bourgeoisie or bourgeois can continue to that the individual bourgeois can continue to exploit the other classes and to enjoy undisturbed property, family, religion, and order only on condition that their class be condemned along with the other classes to like political nullity, that in order to save its purse it must forfeit the crown, and the sword that is to safeguard it must at the same time be hung over its own head as a sword of Damocles. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's punchy. I think the probably the interesting comment there is that this is like in the interest of the individual bourgeois, not so much in the interest of the class as a class, right? Like it's as atomized bourgeois, it's in their interest, but like as a class for themselves, it's not.
Is that what he's saying?
Yeah, no, I think he's kind of saying, I don't know if I'd say that, because it's also in their interest as a class. It's in their social interest, but not their political
It's in their
interest.
social interest, right? Yes.
Yeah. That there is, and it's very important here that when there's a clash between politics and society, it's the social that dominates over the politics. This is like so this is an important thing when it comes to like Mao saying, politics is primary to social organization. That's kind of Mao's line, isn't it?
Politics and command. I don't know if he means this as a description of reality or as something like normative that should be the case.
Even if I don't even think it should be a normative. I wouldn't say it should be normative.
Right. But just as a description of the world, it's false.
Yeah. So by meaning normative, we mean like, because normative, I had to look up normative about 500 times.
Like it should be in command.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if he's saying politics is in command or politics should be in command.
I would say that neither. Like that, the social life, politics is an epiphenomenon of social life, and go Kyle.
So what I was thinking of when I made that earlier comment, which was not correct, is looking at one part of the paragraph and not the whole thing. I was thinking about the German bourgeoisie and how they sort of developed after all this debacle of 1848 and everything, without political power, but very much had their interests safeguarded, right? So like a lot of people say that the weakness of the republic that followed the German Empire was partially due to this kind of politically atrophied bourgeois development in Germany. So that's just what I had in mind when I read this paragraph.
That makes sense. I think it was listener and viewer Jara Handala that pointed out that around the time that Marx was writing, Marx, I guess, was writing about a change in the word how socialism was used, that this was a sort of entering the current political state or the current political climate, you might say, like a long-term climate trend where socialism became associated with statism rather than with anarchy, and that I guess normally when I think of the 18th Brumaire, I think of what's being expressed in the latter half of this paragraph, that bourgeois governance ends up taking these like different forms based on, I don't know, the social strength of the bourgeoisie and the political strength that they've like developed over time. And that a lot of times the bourgeoisie are compelled to allow other forms than the one, you would expect from a perfect typology of like, the end of history, where capitalism means liberal democracy, QED kind of thing.
It's kind of consonant with like the varieties of capitalism school, I guess you might say.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly.
What's this varieties of capitalism school, Cal?
It was just like a academic movement that happened, I think, starting in the 90s, I want to say, which was like investigating more closely the different political economic forms of capitalism. It's kind of an outshoot of the collapse of any kind of like Soviet studies or like Soviet or socialist country studies. These people basically didn't have work anymore, so they ended up doing kind of like comparative political economic studies of different capitalist countries. And so people had like they had more attention and more awareness that like capitalism was not a monolith, and that there was actually more sort of these variations that Esri was describing.
Like Puya pointed out that Saudi Arabia is an absolute monarchy, and you wouldn't say Saudi Arabia is non-capitalist, or something like that, because
exactly,
bourgeois governance. And similarly, this is also a check in the direction of people that are world systems theorists and therefore look at 20th century, quote, socialism as being the de facto forms of capitalism just because they're situated in the world, in a capitalist world, or people that think the Soviet Union was a form of capitalism. Again, I'm on the record saying I don't think that. But if you did, it's consonant with this way of thinking.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's take the next wee bit here. Sorry, 1 minute. I was just trying to find something that I meant to look up for the reading today online there. So I forgot I was muted.
What is it?
Okay.
What was it?
I was trying to find out. There was a few dates mentioned, and one of them didn't really ring a bell, which was January 29th, 1849, and I couldn't couldn't figure out where the fuck what date that was.
January blank
29th, 1849. Okay, you have a look at that, Esri, and maybe Kyle will read the next bit.
All right, let's do it.
Okay.
Let's take it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. From in the domain.
Yep. In the domain of the interests of the general citizenry, the National Assembly showed itself so unproductive that, for example, the discussions on the Paris-Avignon Railway, which began in the winter of 1850, were still not ripe for conclusion on December 2nd, 1851. Gee, that sounds familiar. Where it did not repress or pursue a reactionary course, it was stricken with incurable barrenness. While Bonaparte's ministry partially took the initiative in framing laws in the spirit of the Party of Order, and partly even outdid that party's harshness in their execution and administration, he, on the other hand, sought by childishly silly proposals to win popularity, to bring out his opposition to the National Assembly, and to hint at a secret reserve that was only temporarily prevented by conditions from making its hidden treasures available to the French people. Such was the proposal to decree an increase in pay of 4 sous a day to the non-commissioned officers. Such was the proposal of an honor system loan bank for the workers. money as a gift and money as a loan. It was with prospects such as these that he hoped to lure the masses. Donations and loans, the financial science of the lumpen proletariat, whether of high degree or low, is restricted to this. Such were the only springs Bonaparte knew how to set in action. Never has a pretender speculated more stupidly on the stupidity of the masses.
Right, that line kind of struck me a little bit. I don't, I think the word stupidity of the masses is a bit harsh, but we want to more than a little bit harsh. But was it stupid?
I think it may be a reference to these sort of silly proposals, like, this is not actually good governance in any sense, but it was politically effective. Yeah, I mean, I don't think, opening a loan bank that works on the honor system is very intelligent as a governance principle. But yeah, that may be what he's referring to.
Now, first of all, I think the speculation on the stupidity of the masses thing is Marx is really emphasizing the stupidity of such speculation. If Marx thought the masses were stupid, that would really cut against his the thrust of his worldview and belief system.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of complicated because he lays this at the feet of the lumpen proletariat, which, obviously Marx had no love of.
Right. And do you think that's what he means by the masses?
It may be, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a fair reading.
I would be interested to maybe come back to this with Varn and just see what the German is.
Yeah, he says it right before. Yeah.
Okay.
A financial science of the lumpen proletariat. So that's a very fair reading. But he also talks about, honor system loan bank for the workers, and as Mike Duncan pointed out to Matt Chrisman when Matt Chrisman was trying to be like, dude, Louis Napoleon's Trump, man. Why isn't he Trump? And Mike Duncan is basically like, hold on a minute. Like, Louis Napoleon was known for putting out all this, all these popular appeals for economic relief. He's like a classic Sorelian demagogue.
Yeah.
So he's coming up with all these bong rip utopian proposals and trying to get people to, look at him as a political figure that would bring those things.
Yeah, he again, I feel like he was really influenced by the Saint-Simonians, which totally overlaps with his support from finance, right? Because the Saint-Simonians went into financial speculation after they were socialists. I mean, yeah, they seem to be kind of on the same page in terms of their utopian dreams of social engineering. So that's very different from Trump.
Now, at any part did Louis Napoleon, did he ever encourage people to inject bleach?
No, he wasn't nearly that progressive, Tom. You unlock that in the tech tree, or in the culture tree, I should say, in the 21st century.
Yeah, where is the version of socialism we get where it's that glorious ascending trajectory, and then you get the degeneration thesis, and new technologies are unlocking on the tree are snake oil bleach injections for the masses.
Yeah, traditional your nationality here medicine, all in capitals, replacing the scientific method.
Oh, totally. That would be so amazing. And I think, I think that's. Oh, thank you, Erica. Yeah,
looks.
Oh, hell yeah, Erica.
Do you speak German, Kyle?
No, Erica speaks German. She's
Yeah.
she's always knocking our German pronunciations. You know, that's I do Duolingo for German. So unlike French, I take exception to it being pointed out that I also don't know German.
Yeah, I mean, it looks very, very similar to the English that we have here.
Yeah, nie hat ein Pretender Platter auf die Plattheit den Massen spekuliert. There you go. I think it's actually word for word. Never has a pretender speculated on the stupidity of the masses. And more stupidly on the stupidity of masses.
Yeah, this is probably a supervised translation, and not that, that means that it's, I don't know. Marxist.org has a tendency to have supervised translations by, some of the classical figures in social democracy. Often Engels will often be Engels, like looking over the English translations. But I don't think this, I think I've said this before, but I think this is a later translation. Okay,
let's keep going. There's a couple of dates in here. Did you have any luck, Esri, in finding? Was there not one here?
No, I don't need. No dice. No dice.
It's here. This May 15th, 103. Let's check out what he means here. File no longer available. Well, fuck you, Marx Engels archive. Okay.
Well, no, fuck you, Lawrence and Wishart, the publishers that put out a cease and desist order for Marxist.org, putting these things out for free. Thank you, Marxist.org, for being the most useful thing Trotskyists have ever done.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I was being sarcastic, but so what? Like this 103 is a particular note on a particular copy, is it?
I suppose so.
I guess so. Like the mind boggles, really. I hope some of the mirrors of the old one are still up, because they were doing a Herculean task, putting all this shit up there. Like,
it was definitely my entry point into Marxism. Was Marxist.org.
Very good. Yeah, me not so much. Like when I do a search or something and it might come up, that's about it. Like before this. Okay, let's Esri, how do you feel about reading this bad boy here?
Let's see. That starts from the National and ends
Assembly.
With Eat It Up.
Eat it up.
All right. Yeah. Perfect. The National Assembly flared up repeatedly over these unmistakable attempts to gain popularity at its expense, over the growing danger that this adventurer, whom his debts spurred on and no established reputation held back, would venture a desperate coup. The discord between the Party of Order and the president had taken on a threatening character when an unexpected event threw him back repentant into its arms. We mean the by-elections of March 10th, 1850. These elections were held for the purpose of filling the representative seats that, after June 13th, had been rendered vacant by imprisonment or exile. Paris elected only social democratic candidates. It even concentrated most of the votes on an insurgent of June 1848, on the Flotte. Thus did the Parisian petty bourgeoisie, in alliance with the proletariat, revenge itself for its defeat on June 13, 1849. It seemed to have disappeared from the battlefield at the moment of danger, only to reappear there on a more propitious occasion, with more numerous fighting forces and with a bolder battle cry. One circumstance seemed to heighten the peril. One circumstance seemed to heighten the peril of this election victory. The army voted in Paris for the June insurgent against Lahitte, whatever. A minister of Bonaparte. Thank you. Lahitte. When I'm going, that's definitely a signal for the Francophiles to jump in against law.
Oh yeah, me noted Francophile.
Yes. I'm sorry, I meant francophone, but that's. I know how much you love the wine. Okay. I just went German there. There you go. That's good old-fashioned American conflation for you. One circumstance seemed to heighten the peril of this election victory. The army voted in Paris for the June insurgent against Lafitte, a minister of Bonaparte's, and in the departments largely for the Montagnards, who hereto, though indeed not so decisively as in Paris, maintained the ascendancy over their adversaries. Bonaparte saw himself suddenly confronted with revolution once more. As on January 29th, 1849, as on June 13th, 1849, so on March 10th, 1850, he disappeared behind the party of order. He made obeisance?
Obeisance.
Thank you. Yeah, he made obeisance. His pusillanimously begged pardon. Okay,
yeah.
Yeah. He pusillanimously begged pardon. He offered to appoint any ministry it pleased at the behest of the parliamentary majority. He even implored the Orleanist and Legitimist party leaders, the Thiers, the Belliers, the what is this? Broglise?
Broglise.
The Broglise, the moles.
Get it together. Get it to fucking get out. Edit this fucker.
Jesus, Xanax really did a number on me last night. What is it? What is it, Kyle? Is it moles? Is it moles?
Yeah.
Okay. The moles, in brief, the so-called burgraves, to take the helm of the state themselves. The party of order proved unable to take advantage of this opportunity that would never return. Instead of boldly possessing itself of the power offered, it did not even compel Bonaparte to reinstate the ministry dismissed on November 1st. It contented itself with humiliating him by his forgiveness and adjoining M. Baruch to the Hautpoul ministry as
it's Monsieur Baruch.
Monsieur Baruch, and adjoining Monsieur Baruch to the Hautpoul ministry. Hautpoul ministry.
Hautpoul.
Oh wow, I actually kind of got it. Hautpoul ministry. Hautpoul ministry. As public, sorry, Tom. Sorry, editing Tom, future Tom, Major Tom.
Sorry, all like 1.3 billion French speakers.
Yeah. I mean, not the French ones, but yeah. Okay, I'm gonna stop bashing the French. You're just as legit. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. French. As public prosecutor, this Baruch, I forgot how to say his name already. Baruch had stormed and raged before the High Court at Bourges. The first time against the revolutionists of May 15th, the second time against the Democrats of June 13th, both times because of an attempt on the life of the National Assembly. None of Bonaparte's ministers subsequently contributed more to the degradation of the National Assembly, and after December 2nd, 1851, we meet him more as the comfortably installed and highly paid vice president of the Senate. He had spat in the revolutionist soup in order that Bonaparte might eat it up.
That is gross.
Yeah,
that is like something from some weird porno, scatology video or something.
Yeah, some Desaad or Bataille short story.
Yeah. that's what the M.
Why they liked him.
That's what the M stands for. It's not Monsieur. It's Marquis Baruch.
Is it now?
No, I'm joking.
Okay.
No, he's making an S&M.
Yeah,
it's an S&M joke.
Yeah.
S&M got it.
Yeah. Get with it. Okay. So, okay. What are we going to say here? So we have the resurgence. There's new elections, new parliamentary elections, and we have a resurgence of the Social Democrats. And lo and behold, they come back roaring into, and they take every goddamn seat in Paris. And they say here a majority in the largely for the Montagnards, so for the Social Democrats again out in the departments, which is basically the rural. That's the rural parts. That's what they call them in France, isn't it? Yep. So what happens then? Kyle, do you want to take over and give us the gist on what the Party of Order do?
All right. So Bonaparte's been eating it up, and we move on. The Social Democratic Party, for its part, seemed only to look for pretext to put its own victory once again in doubt and to blunt its point.
Sorry, Kyle. Before we go on, let's talk a little bit about what happened here. Sorry, that's what kind of meant.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
That makes sense. Yeah, I was thinking, damn, we're
that was quick.
Through this shit. Yeah.
Yeah. So like the gist was then that like Bonaparte suddenly was on his knees again.
Yeah.
He's like, oh God damn it, I totally misjudged. I have to crawl in front of the Party of Order. And he offered them basically the reins back. That like the reins that he took from them when he dismissed the ministries and put his own men in. He said, okay, you can put your stuff back in, and you can take over the entire running of the country. He pretty much offered to resign. And they basically all they did is they put one fella in, Baroque. And what did Baroque do? You know, come a year later, he was was vice president of the National Assembly, and a position where he got loads of money, and he was sitting fat on Napoleon's back, the Duke of Napoleon.
Yeah. In the first paragraph I read, usually in the Marxist tradition, the word petty bourgeoisie is basically kulak. You know what I mean? Like, like something very morally like degenerate and deserves to be eliminated. In Marxist political writings, the petty bourgeoisie often can be found in alliance with the proletariat, but not always. There's an ambivalence, a strategic ambivalence to the petty bourgeoisie that, I guess it really finds its apex here. And Marx as a whole, especially in his theoretical reflection on these events, paints the petty bourgeoisie as essentially more prone to line up with the reaction because of class interests. But in his political writings, you see these sorts of things a lot that, winning over certain elements of the petty bourgeoisie can indicate the strength of the proletariat.
But also, it seems like that the leaders typically, I don't know if this is historically true here, tend to be from the petty bourgeoisie in these movements. Yeah, it's nearly always the case in any of like the Labour Party here or the Democrat. It's a lot of the leaders come from petty bourgeois backgrounds,
but also in the Marxist tradition too.
In the Marxist tradition too, but there's a whole, it's not like the Marxist tradition
or properly bourgeois, right?
Right.
There's a lot of sort of like semi-aristocratic Marxists out there, come from money. Yeah.
No, that's true. In the liberal tradition, they do tend to. How do I put this? The people that become bourgeois representatives tend to be kind of rich, but there's this old notion from Aristotle's Politics that no. If you want a truly fair, society, of course you don't want a democracy. That would be weird. But you want the middle class to run things. And there's a lot of translations of Aristotle that just say middle class there. And of course, in America, if you actually ran the numbers, the political class is not the middle. It doesn't line up with the middle class. Like really,
it's almost a meaningless concept in America, right? Yeah. Like the spread is so out there.
Right. It's so inflated as to not mean anything. But the point is that you don't often have literal like billionaires being the politicians directly. That's seen in liberal democracy as being a sign of corruption and decadence. You know, the idea is you have these like hardworking civil servants, or at least people that went to a nice law school, wink, wink, that actually form the political, executive, legislative, judicial arm, and then they serve as a check to the actual winners in society.
Yeah. No, I sorry, I didn't mean the middle class in that sort of like nebulous ideological
American sense. Yeah,
bluff. I just meant
right.
if you took the median in America in terms of wealth, it's almost a meaningless concept because the spread between the poorest and the richest is so enormous. It's like
in middle class in the UK, middle class means you're a doctor or a lawyer. That's what the middle class means. Right. In America, it's a catch-all so that they won't ever have to say the word worker. You ideologically can't say the workers in American politics. Well, you have to say the middle class.
It's kind of true. And people that most people that actually seek to disaggregate the workers from the middle class in American like political life are the right. That's the interesting thing, is that for the most part, the phrase middle class did take the place of working class in like other post-war class compromises. It points to, honestly, there's something in common with that and like, classical fascism too, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But getting back here anyway, a little bit to it, like one thing I was kind of trying to get at was that like, if your representatives are going to be petty bourgeois, middle class types, they're more than likely going to side with law and legalism over revolutionary stuff.
Yeah,
unless they're explicitly a revolutionary, and even then, they often side. Often, like look at the history of all these communist parties in Europe and places. Like where May 1968 happened, they were against that. What do you think? Am I historically wrong again?
You're saying like in '68, the like middle class leadership were against revolution?
The CCP. I'm talking about the French Communist Party.
Oh yeah,
actively worked against the masses.
Yeah.
That was part, class interest and buy-in in the post-war French order. Yeah. It was also partially like
strategic. Like...
Well, no, but that those are strategic considerations that I was just describing. But it's also partially the sort of post-Stalinist party legacy.
Are they strategic interests, really? Are you saying they're individual class interests or strategic interests?
I mean, listen, there was a strategic logic to French, like, national class compromise that a lot of workers' movements, especially in the European post-war order, took under various guises. Sometimes, most often it was under a socialist or labor party, but in Italy and in France, notably, it happened under the Communist Party.
Yeah. Right. So I just wanted to say that, like, Ezra, you're saying that, like, in the political writings, Marx is like a little bit more open about is a little bit more open about the class the potential of the petty bourgeoisie to ally or to come over to the side of the proletariat, which is true. But he also did earlier say that, like, by combining with the proletariat, they poisoned its revolutionary energy.
No. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so, like, it's not really seen in the most positive light, even though it's admitted as a sort of tactical possibility.
It's more of a sign of strength of the proletariat that the petty bourgeoisie will try to parasite off them.
Yeah.
Like,
and you know, if there's anyone in this text who comes off as like the kulaks, it's the lumpen proletariat.
It is
right?
certainly the lumpen.
Yeah.
why do you say that? Like, are the kulaks, are they not the equivalent in a peasant society?
No,
of the
I don't
petty
mean it in a
bourgeois?
literal sense. I mean it in a like basically like social waste that needs to be exterminated sense.
Yeah,
that's the vibe you get off of Marx's take on the lumpen proletariat.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's fair. Because if you're going to take on kulak as a analytic category, which I highly advise against, but if you were akin to petty bourgeoisie, you know, like with regards to, you know, the landlord class, then yeah, it's very different than what's being described in lumpen proletariat.
So Erica in the chat just said that we meant the PCF, which is, that's what I meant. The, you know, not the FCP. God knows what the fuck that is. Probably a far right organization or something. An interesting one from the chat here by Guillermo Marquez. He says that the Portuguese Communist Party also stopped factory occupations in the '74 revolution to align with Cold War policy. You know, so we see that kind of again and again from quote unquote communist parties going against, you know, being essentially, when we look here at the bad influence, the rotting influence of the petty bourgeois on the revolutionary aspects of the proletariat, we actually see that in itself being that type of politics infecting the so-called radical communist parties of Europe.
For sure. I guess the only thing I'd say is that the strategic logic basically stays the same whether you are in the Soviet aligned period, you know, before the Euro-communist turn, and of course in France and Italy, that things are a bit more ambivalent during that time, because national loyalty. There was a big part of the anti-fascist resistance movement that is, you know, loyal to France or Germany, France or Italy, as a as you know, part of the appeal, and lining up with, you know, Italian and French national interests kind of made it awkward because they were also in the employ of Moscow at the same time.
What was it not dominated though by, like, my impression always was that it was dominated more by not wanting to rock the geopolitical boat for the USSR by taking a core country communist.
Correct, but that was Stalin's policy by and large. That ends up being his actual political legacy. Is not like third period, but it's the Popular Front. And so that logic holds between the Popular Front period through the, you know, through the post-war compromise period, and then also after the Euro-communist turn, like when the communist parties become much more Cold War entities, and a lot of them are turning against Leninism and turning against you know, the Soviet world, essentially.
So I've got something to throw. I've got something to throw in here to the mix. Like, we've done our McNair Revolutionary Strategy series. You know, we talked about sortition for a while in Cockshot's response. Like, how do we defend from a party from turning into like what the SPD in Germany turned into? Like, is there a case for organizational structures to be actually, you know, statistically representative?
You have to play a game with different logic than national elections. If you play a game of logic, if you play a game that has the strategic logic of national elections, you're bound to reproduce the same things.
Yeah, but you're gonna get the, you know, it's sort of like what you're describing at the geopolitical level. In the national level, a lot of these communist parties went along with like the theory of monopoly capital, which inherently is about class compromise between like all of the, you know, so-called like subaltern classes, right? It's so like that's an inherent break on revolutionary action of the proletariat, because everybody's just like, well, we just need to get rid of monopoly capital, and then all the workers and the petty bourgeoisie are going to be happy. It's going to be great.
Yeah, because that's the case. That's what it was like in Britain in the 1800s. It was great. You know.
Yeah, we got a little sidetracked, but the point is that yeah, Marx still has a class interest theory of the petty bourgeoisie, but especially, I guess, in the writings on 1848, because this is the last gasp. This is when liberalism really shows its more reactionary side, and theorists of decadence, you know, will periodize things into a heroic era where something has a historically progressive role, and then a decadent, degenerative era. And if you were going to periodize these things, liberalism really is showing its ass, and I should say nationally, because it's always been associated with colonialism. It's showing its ass nationally, and showing its reactionary tendencies nationally in 1848.
Right.
Okay. Let's smash on here. Okay, let's see now. Who's going to give this go? Maybe I'll give this a go because you two had to go there. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the absolute ridiculously crap strategy of I would say kind of on some level understandable, because they got thousands of them got killed in the streets in 1848, you know, the June days. So was 1848 the June days? It was. Or was it 1849? It was 1849, wasn't it? Was it 49? No, it was 48. It was before Napoleon was elected. Okay.
Yeah, 48.
Okay. So after getting their, like, you know, thousands slaughtered on the streets in Paris, it's pretty understanding that the reaction, that even if it was easy for the proletariat and the petty bourgeois to be essentially revolutionary politically, as in vote for maybe a party that may be revolutionary, it's another thing for that party in that class to actually want to bite down again on the actual revolutionary action in the streets.
And I think at this point, the petty bourgeois National Guard has been disarmed, because that happened in the previous like demonstrations.
That's right.
They showed up without weapons, and then I believe they were disarmed after that.
Yes, but I'm not sure how quickly they were disarmed, Kyle. Like, were they fully disarmed by this stage?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
it may factor into their strategy here too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's give this a read. The Social Democrat Party, for its part, seemed only to look for pretexts to put its own victory once again in doubt and to blunt its point. Vidal, one of the newly elected representatives of Paris, had been elected simultaneously in Strasbourg. Like, what the fuck is going on between guys running in two places? It's happened numerous times so far. What the fuck? Is it like, in case they don't get represented in one place, they do another one, and then they have to have a by-election? Is that what's going on?
Hedge your bets. I don't know.
There was there's one of them. Was it not Thiers or somebody was elected in 6 or 7 different places one time? It's true. There's one of them.
Maybe they just have like 6 last names to go around the whole nation.
That's probably it. It's like Iceland. And I think in Iceland, only 4 second names cover like 95% of the population. There's like Magnusson, there's like Sigurdsson or something, and there's like 2 others. Ericsson.
Kind of like,
that's
like
it.
Klingons, House of Martok.
It's like literally is.
Rogue.
Yeah. Apparently they took all the good looking Irish women That's the thing that people say in Ireland.
That's what the Icelandic people always told me is like, oh yeah, like the reason why like people are so ugly in the British Isles is because we took all the good looking people. That was a common thing I heard from Icelandic people when I was hanging out with them.
Yeah. That they literally would come on raids and they would go through the villages and they would take all the best looking women and then they just go back to Iceland. And it's like, apparently a quarter of the genes are Irish or something like that.
Can't wait to read the evolutionary, sociology paper on that, Bar.
Yeah. Let's keep going. Let's get out of this social fascism stuff here now. Where did we? I blame Kyle. Let's be honest. Okay, now. Yeah, it was you or Esri. I had to blame somebody. I said I'm always giving out to Esri. I'll give out to Kyle for a change. Okay, he was induced to decline the election for Paris and accept it for Strasbourg, and so instead of making its victory at the polls conclusive and thereby compelling the party of order to contest it in Parliament at once, instead of thus forcing the adversary to fight at the moment of popular enthusiasm and favourable mood in the army, the Democratic Party wearied Paris during the months of March and April with a new election campaign. Let the aroused popular passions wear themselves out in this repeated provisional election game. Let the revolutionary energy satiate itself with constitutional successes, dissipate itself in petty intrigues, hollow declamations, and sham movements. Let the bourgeoisie rally and make its preparations. And lastly, weaken the significance of the March elections by a sentimental commentary in the April by-election, the election of Eugene Sue. In a word, it made an April Fool of March 10th. The parliamentary majority understood the weakness of its antagonist. Its 17 burgraves, for Bonaparte had left it to the direction of and responsibility for the attack, drew up a new electoral law, the introduction of which was entrusted to Monsieur Fauché, who solicited his dishonour for himself. On May 8th, he introduced the law by which universal suffrage was to be abolished, a residence of 3 years in the locality of the election to be imposed as a condition on the electors, and finally, the proof of this residence made dependent in the case of workers on a certificate from their employers. I'll just do the next little paragraph. I think it kind of rolls together. Just as the Democrats had in revolutionary fashion raged and agitated during the constitutional election contest, so now, when it was requisite to prove the serious nature of that victory, arms in hand, did they in constitutional fashion preach order, calm, majesté, lawful action, that is to say, blind subjection to the will of the counter-revolution, which imposed itself as the law. During the debate, the Mountain put the party of order to shame by asserting against the latter's revolutionary passion the dispassionate attitude of the Philistine who keeps within the law, and by felling that party to earth with the fearful reproach that it was proceeding in a revolutionary manner. Even the newly elected deputies were at pains to prove their decorous and discreet action. What a misconception it was to decry them as anarchists and construe their election as a victory for revolution. On May 31st, the new electoral law went through. The Montagne contented itself with smuggling a protest into the president's pocket. I feel like I should have said the president's pants. The electoral law was followed by a new press law, by which the revolutionary newspaper press was entirely suppressed. It had deserved its fate. The National and La Presse, two bourgeois organs, were left after this deluge as the most advanced outposts of the revolution.
Yeah, so I think the thing that really goes against the sort of like, I don't want to say excuses, but the justifications for their inaction that you mentioned before, Tom, is that they did have the army on their side, and they didn't take advantage of that. So, like, there was a significant portion of the army that was on their side, not just the petty bourgeois National Guard, and they pissed that away.
Yeah, and that's a massive thing because the army were never really on their side in any of the revolutions. The French parts, were they? Like, I mean,
no,
the
they went back and forth. Like, Marx describes how they go back and forth, but they eventually are like, fuck these guys. Like, let's just throw in with Bonaparte because, like, they're useless. They're hopeless.
Yeah, but I mean, like, say in the first French Revolution and all that period, like the revolutionary times, the army never went really on the side of the revolution. Did it in the early parts? Like,
in the early parts, yeah,
like as in the part where the revolution was trying to get into power. Like in those situations, the army was pretty much always on the side of the ruling class. Like this is like kind of a
because like they were paid mercenaries. It was a very different army than than the one that existed after the revolution.
Yeah, but like the army never came out in 1848. It on the side. It basically did it stay neutral when the National Guard came out?
There's definitely a passage in here where Marx describes how they occasionally would throw their support behind the revolution and then be extremely disappointed by it. I can't remember exactly where that passage was, but he definitely does address that like their loyalties in this period of political chaos were not exclusively with the bourgeoisie or with Napoleon. There were different factions of the army that would side with one part or the other, and the ones who sided against the party of order were deported to Algeria or wherever to basically they got their stationing in Alaska to sort of like waste away in obscurity. So like there were like political punishments for those sections of the army that were revolutionary.
Yes. It does remind me, this whole section of how like the new kind of enthusiasm of the voters for some revolutionary action was betrayed by their leaders and representatives. There is kind of something of like 2008 and Obama in that. It's hard to not see it. It's hard to see that, let's try and like it seems to be the same as it ever was.
The pardoning of all of the Bush era crimes by Obama, I think, is very consonant with this.
Or even like, the thing of having one economic team advising him during the election and then got rid of them all and brought in the Wall Street boys, which was obviously known by all the Wall Street people at the time. Everybody must have known it. And also in his health, is what is that when he was doing his health care stuff? He took the public option immediately off the table.
Yeah, whipping that, basically like crushing anyone who's advocating a public option.
Yeah, so it's like,
well, it was a little more complicated in that because the public option was actually something that he campaigned on and to an I don't want to say fought for, but he made a show of fighting for it, which points to this, like, the way that Republicans and Democrats let down their voters is different. Republicans have a party line. They have a program in normal times, I should say. They used to have a bit of Leninism about them. They were capable of getting legislation through. The Democrats use a sort of, I'm just being a nice guy posture inside the legislature to let down its voters in a functional way, right? And the public
they also
option,
have the blue dogs to blame their failures on, right?
right? And so the public option was just such a thing. Now, if they actually actively blamed their failure on them in an active way, use the presidency as the quote bully pulpit to kind of, get their party in line, and or even just use regular parliamentary, even use regular legislative whips in a normal, effective way that you would see on Yes Minister or something or I'm sorry, that you would see on the British House of Cards. They could actually accomplish a lot more, but they use their weakness as an excuse.
It's by design. It's totally by design.
It's clearly a functional kind of weakness. It was one of the things that really got me to accept this concept of a functional explanation, that they're doing, you see this correlation, you see the behavior, you see the outcome, you're not sure how you actually get from point A to point B, but you know that one is causing the other. The effect somehow will select for a cause and then have it be caused. It's it's an attempt to describe something systemic that can happen in more than one way.
I think, the old adage of look what people do and not what they say, that's how you understand people's motives. Look at, I think that, maybe on the individual level, somebody can be blind to their own motives, but not in a big strategic operation like a party like that.
How reactionary. You want to look at revealed preferences? Oh my God. And not focus on their symbolic, life? My word.
I'm kind of unsure whether I'm not sure what side of the joke I land on there. Explain.
Oh no, I'm people flap their gums about all kinds of things.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
And then you see what they actually do.
Yeah.
There's just it's ironically I don't know, there's a lot of, how do I say this? Never mind. The point is that the left doesn't like to think strategically, in the contemporary sense of using strategic modeling.
Yeah, they don't have any, it's very, very poor. It's not something you come across any type of decent strategic thought very often.
Yeah, I would say that's also by design, because
yes, absolutely.
If you're playing a game and a bunch of your new recruits don't know it, that helps you.
I was going to say something here now. Let me see. It's gone. Anybody have anything else to say here? Kyle or Esri? Okay, Esri, do you want to? Oh God, there was something I was going to say.
I mean, this part, it's really just the Montaigne recapitulating the same failures again, right? They had a strength in Parliament, they pissed it away. They got some more strength in Parliament, they pissed it away again.
Yeah, there's a lot of pissing going on here today. So we had somebody
eating it up, and there's pissing, and that's the whole thing here.
Yeah, that's the chapter in 3 words.
It's a very scatological chapter, but it's like one of those 1970s novels. That's super erudite, and then someone shits in someone's mouth.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
What? It's a Michel Houellebecq novel. I
was thinking more Thomas Pynchon, but yeah.
I haven't read Thomas Pynchon.
Me neither, but who needs to when you got Wikipedia?
That's true. Or Pornhub. Now, there's we have another one. So another thing here is I remember watching. Did anybody watch? maybe I mentioned it before in this season, is like in this series, is the opening scene of the first episode of Boardwalk Empire, where Steve Buscemi character is playing a liquor running a politician who's basically running the drink game during the Depression in Atlantic City, and he was in front of one of these like abstinence meetings with these women, and he stood up in front of a hall full of all these women wanting to ban alcohol, or being against alcohol, and he was there and he was giving it all the spiel about how this is alcohol is terrible, and he shakes all their hands and donates money to them and goes around the back door. He walks down the street, goes in, meets the boys, he goes, oh yeah, we got 4,000 a bottle of whiskey in the boss, and you're like, yeah, great. And it's like that shit, like people can watch that. What gets me is that people will watch that on the telly. They'll watch it and they go, oh yeah, like, yeah, fuck it, yeah, that's totally normal. And then I'll say it to like my father or something, and I'll say, you see that guy there, the head of like the party you support? That's exactly what he's doing. And he'll say, oh, you're very cynical.
Right.
It's like, I wish people could be as cynical as they possibly could, or at least have some level of applying their common sense when they watch a film. It's like, when you're watching The Matrix, right? That the guy who plays the guy in Sopranos who plays the character that Tony ends up he kills Tony Soprano's horse, the fellow with the wig, and Tony ends up Tony kills him, and they have a fight in the kitchen, and Tony kills him. Does anybody?
Spoilers, people. No, I haven't.
Kyle,
seen it.
have you seen it?
No. I was a bit young to watch The Sopranos when it was running.
Oh God! But anyway, he's the character he's the one that betrays them in The Matrix. Remember?
The only thing I know is Anthony Jr. Sinag.
You should really watch Sopranos. It's fucking.
I know the guy you're talking about from The Matrix, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the guy who betrays them. Yeah, he betrays them.
Wow, this steak tastes really good. I don't care if it's a fake steak.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the guy. Yeah.
That's the guy, right? And when everybody is watching it in the cinema, they go, that piece of shit, he's betraying everybody, right?
Like
everybody who's watching it in real life fucking betrays the working class. It's the fucking truth of it. All these people sitting down watching, they're all fucking eating the steak. Everybody watching that film is eating the fucking steak. Sorry, I had to say that. I've been meaning to say this for a long time.
I mean, yeah, I think especially if you take the trans reading of The Matrix, that is the authorial intent. That is also very true. Being put out in the year 1999.
Did you see? I saw today on Twitter that Neo's what's his name? What was his name? Mr.
Anderson.
Mr. Anderson.
Son of man.
His on his passport, his passport was the expiry date was the 11th of September 2001.
Oh, tits.
Sorry.
Wow.
That really made me laugh. Okay, right. Who wants to go here? Let's. I think it's you, Kyle, to go. We've got two paragraphs.
Okay, so we're gonna get to the army stuff I was mentioning. I just realized it was in the next paragraph.
Bring it on home, Kyle.
Astute reading there. Okay. We have seen how during March and April, the Democratic leaders had done everything to embroil the people of Paris in a sham fight. How after May 8th, they did everything to restrain them from a real fight. In addition to this, we must not forget that the year 1850 was one of the most splendid years of industrial and commercial prosperity, and the Paris proletariat was therefore fully employed. But the election law of May 31st, 1850 excluded it from any participation in political power. It cut the proletariat off from the very arena of the struggle. It threw the workers back into the position of pariahs, which they had occupied before the February Revolution. By letting themselves be led by the Democrats in the face of such an event, and forgetting the revolutionary interests of their class for a momentary case and comfort, they renounced the honor of being a conquering power, surrendered to their fate, proved that the defeat of June 1848 had put them out of the fight for years, and that the historical process would for the present again have to go on over their heads. As for the petty bourgeois democracy, which on June 13 had cried, "But if once universal suffrage is attacked, then we'll show them," it had now consoled itself with the contention that the counter-revolutionary blow which had struck it was no blow, and the law of May 31st no law. On the second Sunday in May 1852, every Frenchman would appear at the polling place with ballot in one hand and sword in the other. With this prophecy, it rested content. Lastly, the army was disciplined by its superior officers for the elections of March and April 1850, just as it had been disciplined for those of May 28, 1849. This time, however, it said decidedly, "The revolution shall not dupe us a third time." So yes, the army occasionally voted in the revolutionary direction, but those who did so were disciplined.
What do we think about this sentence here? It cut the proletariat off from the very arena of the struggle. That's an interesting sentence.
Yeah, I think it's because this is a political text.
But
right?
like, yeah, but like, what's all like? This goes very much
Election
against
law.
anarchists, doesn't it? It's
Well,
like,
but it says it excluded it from any participation in political power.
So,
right?
like, let's think about like what. So, what is this election law?
they basically they said you had to live 3 years in the same place, and if you're a worker, you had to get your boss to sign off on it.
Yeah.
So you basically, if
There
you're
you go.
a radical worker, you wouldn't get signed off. But so like, is he saying like? So what I'm trying to get at here is that Marx is making a case for the political realm as a place for struggle for social change. He's not like, he's not an anarchist and saying, well, the vote doesn't matter here. He's saying that it is an arena for a struggle. It's not the arena, but it is an arena. Well, he says the very arena of the struggle. But like,
Yeah,
I think
but
he's
again,
because
the
that's
political struggle.
exactly. But So what I'm saying is that he's putting a lot of emphasis on politics as an area of struggle, as opposed to just purely social.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, this had a really this had a big importance to Marx because Marx believed that democracy and capitalism were essentially incompatible. And that was sort of a common sense at the time, that if you gave everyone the vote, if you actually did universal citizenship, like the French Revolution was gesturing at, that you would have, mob rule and class warfare. And it wasn't until the 20th century with the, Bolshevization, civil war kind of tendency becoming, bringing out the anti-democratic side of Marxism, which is, Marx does have bits where he's trying to gesture beyond democracy, so he postures as being against it. That, Marx's position is out of our time, essentially. The achievement of universal suffrage de jure, not really, or de facto, because there's a lot of ways to do vote suppression. But even if you had perfect voting parity in the existing systems that we have, you could imagine it coinciding with bourgeois capitalist rule.
Well, I think in America, there are a lot of sort of the Jacobin crowd who still kind of hold to Marx's line there, right? That universal suffrage does not exist, and if it did, we would have a workers' republic. That the political cannot admit actual full universal suffrage without voter suppression is just not compatible.
Well, in Australia, they
right.
do it.
Yeah,
It's against the law not to vote.
There are counterexamples. I think there are enough counterexamples.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, this is in a sense a living tradition in America. Absolutely. Because of the peculiarities of American politics.
Well, all American progressives think this way, and they actually think so for a very good reason, is that whenever you do polling on policy, you see mostly progressive majorities, even like, really like 70% majorities, like on progressive issues. But then when you look at the actual expression in institutions, you have a very different picture. It's much more conservative and reactionary. What's not being done, of course, is the institutional analysis, and that, hey, read the fucking Federalist. These institutions are designed explicitly to curb class conflict. They didn't do so in exactly the way that the founders and Hamilton intended, because most people don't really give a shit about local politics, and that's not why things, the system mitigates class conflict. But the very DNA of the country is mitigation of class conflict, like mitigation of democracy breaking out. Even though there were all these reforms, that is still very much operational. That is still very like the fundamental condition of the system.
Like I've seen interviews with like numerous conservative think tank types, economist types, and they say, well, I don't know if I'm call myself a Democrat, because if this is like Marx's analysis is like, well, if everybody has the vote and they can just vote to take away my stuff, like they will explicitly come out. There are like not a small number of bourgeois and petty bourgeois who will actually say that. It's they're only in favor of it such that it's in their interest. As we can see, this whole goddamn book is about.
Yeah, I mean, I think in America, that sort of anti-democratic line is bolstered by this kind of patina of like founder worship and like constitutional patriotism, where it's maybe more acceptable to say that. Whereas in other countries, you might think that, but probably not going to come out and say it on the regular.
I have a question
if you're a political operative.
I have a question for you, Kyle.
Yeah.
Like, you're in a suburb there in like what city are you in again? You're in Alberta.
I'm not in a suburb. I'm in the city center. But
okay.
I'm in Calgary. Yeah.
Say you're in Calgary and you're driving around. Like, do people have like Canadian flags flying on a flagpole outside their house?
Especially in Alberta, yeah. Which is ironic because of like all the separatist stuff. It's just Texas, it's Texas.
Wow.
But yeah, it's that whole dynamic. But yes, absolutely, you see Canadian flags flying around.
Because America is like literally the only country in the world. I've been to Canada, but I'm only there for a day or two, a few times. But so I didn't really get out to the suburbs. But like, America is literally the only country in the world I'd been where flags fly like that. Like, if somebody had a flag,
Monaco, excuse me.
I haven't been to Monaco.
No, there are places, but U.S. is still the biggest empire, so of course,
seriously,
we fly the Roman flag.
You don't find seriously. I don't think there is a European country that flies flags like America. I seriously,
European. You're probably right.
Not in Africa,
except Monaco again.
Not in Asia that I've been to. Like,
you really don't. I don't know.
South America. I was in all of South America. There was none. Like, literally. It's very, very strange. It's like you be like, you're probably, when you grow up in it, you probably don't notice it, but it's like, to Europeans, it's like if you flew a flag in Ireland, basically what people think is that you're in the IRA. That's literally what it means.
Yeah,
it's kind of weird.
There's a very different thing about nationalism here. Although it is getting a little more European, where people are more skeptical of expressions of patriotism. But I mean, it's extraordinarily relative to, you know, when I was younger and I had red, white, and blue braces.
Damn.
Yeah.
I mean, Canadians
girl.
I'd say Canadians are almost that patriotic, but not quite. Not quite.
We're number one, baby. Never let the world forget it, you know? I picked up breakfast this morning as a treat, and I drove across a bridge that used to have, and, you know, would often have all of the flags of the world, like, kind of lined up against it, to the point where I have a picture of myself with a North Korean flag near a Starbucks in like a bougie area, because they had like a UN flag display kind of thing. But right now, because it's getting closer to July, every single one of them has been replaced with an American flag.
Oh,
that's when the true colors come out.
Hell yeah. So I could go to the same place that in Westport, Connecticut, they're flying a North Korean flag. I can go there, and now they're flying an American flag in the same place. And you know what? They'll probably, after 4th of July and summer is over, replace it with the North Korean flag.
Yep.
So there
you go. That's as it should be.
Oh,
as it should be.
As the chat has been gesturing to, let's not forget the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah, that is insane. That is insane.
Speaking of North Korea, that is some crazy shit. It
reminds me a lot of like the Imperial Rescript on education, which was like the ultra reactionary conservative education policy that came in Japan prior to sort of the World War II era, and is like, you know, yeah, I mean, even today, teachers in Japan are extremely like, I don't know, in general, as a corporate body, are quite anti-nationalist as a reaction against that. Like flying the Japanese flag at a school is like, holy shit, controversial.
Yeah, like, you know, in Ireland, like not very many people speak Gaelic. Like we all learn it in school and all that, but there's only like 50,000 people, native speakers, really left, something like that. But like near when there was land reform in the 1930s after the revolution, there was they near where I come from, a few miles away, there was a whole load of land from some lord that they redistributed to basically people from the west of Ireland, a Gaeltacht area, where all these like Irish speakers came over in the 1930s, and they gave them all farms for nothing. And but out there, it's like they have like a school where you can go, and now it's actually getting quite common now for schools to be all through Irish, but back then it wasn't. And there was a Gaeltacht school, and you could go there. A friend of mine went there, and they had they would have, literally, it was like America, they'd have the flag, they'd all have to stand outside the flag and sing the national anthem, but like, I mean, in a really IRA way, that when there was a number of like IRA guys on the run in the 80s when I was a kid that done kidnappings and stuff, and literally loads of them stayed in Rathcarn, in that like tiny fucking 50 houses or 100 houses. Like the amount of terrorists that went through that place was phenomenal. It's like like, and a fella I worked with, he got caught, who lived out there, he got caught with the biggest arms find in land arms find in Irish history at the time. It was one of the things from Gaddafi sent over. The only flamethrower ever discovered. Fucking hell. Anti-tanks. Madness. Anyway, we got one paragraph left. Lexi, or Esri. Jesus, I caught it in time. Esri.
Awesome.
I can edit it. It didn't happen.
You can.
Yeah. Let's hit the final one.
Let's do it.
There's no French names in here. You should be all right.
Thank you.
Do you know how to
proofed it?
Do you know how to pronounce assembly? I'm president.
Actually, the one French phrase I can find here, I do know how to pronounce. So I will go ahead. The law of May 31st, 1850 was the coup d'etat of the bourgeoisie. All its conquests over the revolution hitherto had only a provisional character and were endangered as soon as the existing National Assembly retired from the stage. They depended on the hazards of a new general election, and the history of elections since 1848 irrefutably proved that the bourgeoisie's moral sway over the mass of people was lost in the same measure as its actual domination developed. On March 10th, universal suffrage declared itself directly against the domination of the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie answered by outlawing universal suffrage. The law of May 31st was therefore one of the necessities of the class struggle. On the other hand, the Constitution required a minimum of 2 million votes to make an election of the President of the Republic valid. If none of the candidates for the presidency received this minimum, the National Assembly was to choose the president from among the 3 candidates to whom the largest number of votes would fall. At the time when the Constituent Assembly made this law, 10 million electors were registered on the rolls of voters. In its view, therefore, a fifth of the people entitled to vote was sufficient to make the presidential election valid. The law of May 31st struck at least 3 million votes off the electoral rolls, reduced the number of people entitled to vote to 7 million, and nevertheless retained the legal minimum of 2 million for the presidential election. It therefore raised the legal minimum from a fifth to nearly a third of the effective votes. That is, it did everything to smuggle the election of the president out of the hands of the people and into the hands of the National Assembly. Thus, through the electoral law of May 31st, the party of order seems to have made its rule doubly secure by surrendering the election of the National Assembly and that of the President of the Republic to the stationary section of society.
Seemed. Always an important word with Marx.
Oh yes. Yeah, seemed. No, that's so many misreadings of Marx can be attributed to the way that he throws his voice and says, this is what it looked like.
Yeah, and what is he? So when he says stationary section of society, what does he mean there?
Well,
the non-revolutionary.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's see. Stationary. Yeah, I'm
I think that's what he means. It's like the existing power.
Yeah.
Block. Yeah.
Like state related etymologically.
Stationary.
No, I think it really just means like they're inert. Like they are like.
Oh, okay.
They're not like progressive. Like they're not in movement. Have no historical motive force to them.
Okay, no, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I kind of meant that as a discussion piece as opposed to what does he mean there? But yeah,
no. But that's a good clarifying point.
Yeah. So here we have it. Like we have it. We've got all the way. Bourgeois. There's been they pissed it away the second time. The party of order have thinking they've nailed down Bonaparte. They think he was weak.
The Jesuits are back.
The Jesuits are back. The wine is expensive. You're not allowed. You have to go to mass. God damn it! I went to mass every morning at 7:30 in a Catholic boarding school for 5 years.
Christ,
telling you, I feel it for the French here. I feel it for them. We had no wine unless you were stealing the wine from the sacristy, which myself and my mate did. We used to water down the wine from the sacristy. That was it's all coming out now.
Hell yeah. Get ripped on church wine.
Yeah, it was nasty. I must say, it was nasty. I came back. I have a story for you. I was a church organist, and I played in a competition in Dublin, and I came second, and I was really pissed off. And so I came, myself and my mate. He was turning the pages for me that day, and we went on the piss. So we're only like 16. We found some dodgy bar in Dublin. We went in, and I had 8 pints of Guinness. like a lot of Guinness, and it was like only my second time I think ever drinking. I had 8 pints.
You already drank more than I've ever drank.
Yeah, so we went. Well, God, that's pretty sad. So I have drank 20 pints of Guinness in one night. That's a long time ago.
Oh,
Lord of mercy.
Yeah, but so I went. We came back and I vomited all over myself on the train on the way home. I vomited all over this poor woman who was sitting opposite me, and I vomited on this like my music that I had like borrowed from the local cathedral. I was wearing a suit. I had puked all over it.
Babe.
When I got back, my mate got me. We stumbled back to like thing. If we were caught drinking, we would have been expelled. So, but I was supposed to be playing the church that night. We had mass that night, and I came in, and my mates smuggled me up into the organ. It was upstairs. There was like a round. There was like a kind of one of these staircase, a metal staircase up to the where the organist plays, and they got me up there, and so I was all right. I was up there. I was kind of sober, and I played a few of the hymns, simple enough. And then normally I play a classical piece or something during like communion, when it would take a while people to get communion. And so I said, "Fuck this!" I said I lost that day, and this piece I played was this like it's about 20 minutes long. It's one of Vidor. I think it's Vidor's the opening part of Vidor's Sixth Symphony for organ, and it's a master, it's a blaster of a piece. So I said, "Fuck this, I'm playing it." So I pull out all the stops on the fucking organ, and I started playing it, and I blow the whole fucking place apart. But not only that, but like not only that, but like the piece is like 15, like I don't know, like 10, 15 minutes long, and like the thing only takes like 3 minutes. So for like 7 minutes, the priest was staring up at me, and I was thrashing away. This like thing was going on and on.
Oh my
God! So I did it, and I played the whole thing, and then afterwards, like my mate came up, and who had done some of the singing, and he came up and he was like, "What the fuck was that?" And I was like, he saw that I was like all over the place drunk, and he was like, "The priest is gonna be waiting for you outside the church." And I was like, "Fuck!" So what we do? So what we did is you could lift one of these large pipes out of the organ, and you lift it out. He held it, and I climbed into the middle of the organ, and we put the pipe back down into it, and so the guy, so the priest was like. The priest, after a while, the whole church had emptied and there was no sign of me coming out. So the priest came up, and he came up into where my mate was up there, and he said, "Where's Mr. O'Brien?" And he was like, "Oh, he went out earlier." And he was like, the priest was like square-eyed. He was like looking at it. He's like, "What the fuck?" He's like, "How could he have slipped past me?" And so basically I stayed there for ages until I had a cold shower. They threw me in the showers or something. The sober managed to get up and avoided them. So sorry. Why was I telling this?
Tom,
just because the Jesuits came back.
I don't know, Tom, but that was the best story I think you've ever told.
It was amazing.
I could just imagine. No wonder why you shred on the keys. So 16-year-old Tom O'Brien is fucking smashed, ripping on a classical organ piece like 2-3 times over time during the service, and then lays low in an organ pipe. To avoid because he threw up on himself like 5 hours ago. And others, himself and others.
It wasn't 5 hours. It was probably only about an hour and a half ago. Like I was still pretty much covered in vomit, to be honest, when I was playing it. Like I had managed to wipe some of the vomit off my suit. But I think that's kind of a fitting ending to tonight's episode.
We never actually talked about the last paragraph.
Let's talk about it.
Oh my god! But you promised me in the edit that part comes last, because like how else do you? How after that, you know, nothing else can follow it up. Not even a discussion on, for instance,
this it gets back to the kind of key point on legalism again, isn't it? This taking of legalism for political power.
And universal suffrage and its role in the class character of political formation. What Marx is saying here is that the necessity of class struggle meant the bourgeoisie getting rid of universal suffrage, the bourgeoisie getting rid of domination of the bourgeoisie.
Yep.
And again, universal suffrage still here associated with domination of the, but by the bourgeoisie, right? Like,
are we sure about that? Because it says the history of elections since 1848 had irrefutably proved that the bourgeoisie's moral sway over the mass of people was lost in the same measure as its actual domination developed.
Yeah, fair. But I guess this is like a changing point in the system, right? Like, at first, again, I'm going to use these terms. We might object to this, but, in the heroic phase of the bourgeoisie, it and universal suffrage kind of went hand in hand because it had the moral sway of the people.
Right.
And so, after this point, when it loses moral sway with the people, then universal suffrage and bourgeois dominance. So that's, it's a good qualifying point. Like, it's not in lockstep. Marx is kind of pointing to something that differs here.
Because the universal suffrage was actually brought about by the proletariat in 1848, and not really what the bourgeois leaders wanted.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. I'm overreading because of conversations in the chat, about democracy, universal suffrage, and Marx. Because universal suffrage here is still like a good to Marx. It's something that he assumes would have to happen in order for there to be class struggle.
Isn't it an assumption that do you need it for class struggle? Because they had class struggle before.
I don't think you need it for class struggle, but
you need the proletariat to win the class struggle. That's what you need it for in Marx's theory of anything Marx sketches out in the transition to communism. It's through the proletariat winning, universal suffrage and winning labor rights, and then wielding these rights in society, against the society.
Right. Basically making the social republic in that sense, universal suffrage and therefore numerical superiority, establishing the dictatorship of the proletariat.
Yeah, and inevitably you'll be attacked by the bourgeoisie.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think your basic point there kind of stands, right? That the seeming failure of this formula is where you get Frankfurt School stuff, right?
Explain that.
Once you have universal suffrage achieved in many capitalist countries, and it does not lead to the dictatorship of the proletariat, that's when you get critical theory, Frankfurt School, responses and trying to understand why the motor of social progress has been sabotaged or has self-sabotaged.
Yeah, so this is the kind of the power of ideology over material conditions. Yeah, to me it's quite interesting. Well, when was this idea really start to become to the fore of that Frankfurt School analysis? What years are we talking about?
Really comes to the fore in the early 60s. or sort like
But
I
even
would
when was
say-
it written? When was the stuff written?
Oh, it started to be written in like the late 40s.
Yeah, like it seems. I don't know, like when it's something that people say about the ideology stuff, and there is something to be said for it to me. But like, I don't know what your experiences is or are when you tell somebody you're a communist. Like invariably, when I say they're communist, and people, the first thing they'll say like, "Well, like Stalin."
Well, but
And to me, that's the dominant thing over ideology. It's the experience of what happened. That's my instinct.
Oh, okay. No. That's a good point. Yeah, because most people are thinking that you're staking out your ideology. You're not
Correct.
like thinking about like any broader social forces that I like mustaches and gulags or something.
Yeah, like, and I think that it kind of makes sense from a practical point of view analysis, like a material analysis, why the proletariat have gone a certain way right now, because they've seen their first instance of it hasn't worked out very well. And so there's a reticence to go there again. I think it might take a whole couple of generations of people for that to become like talking about, maybe like, when people say, oh, yeah, well, what about Cromwell? Irish people remember him, but no one else remembers a fucking goddamn thing about him. You know what I mean? That it might take that thing whereby that lived memory of what that experience was fades. And that, like, I think the power of ideology might be overrated. Who knows? We're kind of going off on a
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to the Frankfurt School, like they also had an analysis of the Soviet Union and why it was not a good thing. Like they weren't saying like, oh shit, why didn't the proletariat go over to the Soviet side? That wasn't their critique.
Yeah. No, fair enough.
I mean, no, we're not done. You're right. We flew away from what's being said here. This is about voter disenfranchisement being led by the bourgeoisie that traditionally would have been for voter enfranchisement. It's about that limit within liberalism where they're not actually for universal suffrage, like. They're not even for like universal man suffrage. You know what I mean? Like there's simply like limits. In France, like universal suffrage was universal man suffrage, even in the French Revolution. Is that wrong, Kyle? Like
that's correct. That's correct. Yep.
Yeah.
It's okay. Universal man suffrage. Right. I believe was what it was, because it was a long fight from there to get the women the vote.
Okay, that's what I figured, but just making sure. So like, yeah, this is universal suffrage here is probably like not yet actually universal suffrage, but again, like maybe the way that you retain Marx's kind of political framework from here is to say, well, what we consider universal suffrage has expanded, and the bourgeoisie keep doing voter suppression and ways to define people out of being able to vote, which if this is true, and there's a lot of like electoral like manipulation and gerrymandering where they make like ethnic districts or clump people together so that one ethnicity can't like actually be represented in its areas or something. Like there are a lot of like vote suppression things that are operative, and it's I guess an open question that if these things were fixed, how left or how different would representation be in, I mean, the United States is an obvious example. Like it is an open question. How far would it go? How much would it change?
I don't even think it would change that much. Like if you take like a modern European state where they have full suffrage versus, say, America, you have a lot of voter suppression and stuff like that and gerrymandering. Like, say, somewhere like Ireland, it's not really done like that. You know, there's not weird boundaries so that people can get disenfranchised and stuff like that. It's pretty properly bourgeois run. But like
Ireland is quite different than the United States, you know, and you can't always
I know. Yeah,
reason by analogy, you know.
No, that wasn't. That was my point. The point was I was going to say was like that. Like, even if, like, say you have one that's won reasonably well for a bourgeois state, right? Like, say Ireland or even England won pretty well, right? But you still don't get like 100% voting turnout. You only get like 65, 70, and in America you're getting 55. So it would only be a 10% probable difference anyway. You know what I mean? That's just the reality of the thing.
And the voter participation has been declining ever since the 70s, right? So it's there's something else going on that is not simply like active voter suppression that is leading to apathy towards the political, right?
Yeah, I think it's the public, you know, like this a very normal thing you hear people say, actually, they're all the same. That's what people say in Ireland. With politics, who are you going to vote for? And you go, actually, they're all the same. And like they mean it, like, and they're kind of right in the sense that like they're just politicos. They, you know, like they, you know, there's not much fucking difference between any of them. You don't have this divide of, oh, like these are actual socialists and these are actual capitalists. They're all just a blancmange, you know, of nothingness.
Is that French for blob?
I don't know what it means. I sometimes I say these words and it could mean like, you know, trousers or something. Let me see. Blancmange.
Yeah. Again, there's a sort of left communist theory of decadence that the dynamics Marx was talking about had like a sell-by date, and we're past that. You know, often you'll get like 1914 as the moment of decadence. If you look at something like, you know, communization, a lot of that stuff might say the break was in the 70s if they, you know, are courteous enough to give, you know, each wave of Marxism its, you know, time period where it fit, its, you know, place in its particular cycle of struggle or what have you. Because others are just like, nah, that shit was just always wrong, let's face it.
Blancmange is actually a dessert. I don't know why the hell it's I don't know what word I'm looking for, to be honest.
Tasty. Decadence is decadent in two senses of the word.
Yes, decadence.
It's like me trying to show off using like a French word that's totally out of context. They're just like a dessert. They're like a creamy dessert.
Maybe that's why we don't get French listeners, actually.
Yeah.
Snobbery and decay.
Ever since Kyle started talking about fucking
nailed it, France. Yeah. Look, it was bad, okay?
Maybe there's just enough communist media in French that they don't need to listen to what, you know, Anglos have to say about it.
Okay, are we done yet?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is like what's going on right now with universal suffrage and political inertness is a bit of an open question. I mean, I think we all know that like people are being shut out of the political in some way or another, but there's also a lot of apathy going on. And we've seen from like the Bloomberg failure that it's not simply a matter of people just buying their way into politics. So
that's right.
You know, there's something going on. What Marx suggested about universal suffrage was clearly not 100% correct. We need to think about that. But, you know, he did do a pretty good description of the dynamic at his time.
Well, on that note, I think we'll put on a bit of that organ symphony music and we'll go to the chat. We'll have some background.
Fuck yeah.
Let's give it a go. Let's see if we can get it starting here now. Let's see, come on.
I want the original recording.
Here we go. Okay, it's a bit grim sounding here today. Who do we have? We have Jake P, Dugon Clock, whose parents actually speak Irish. Erica Whelan, KGB operative. Benjamin Hanshoe, Grimlock, Lex Whitfield. Anybody else there? Stank. Let's not forget
Stank, of course, Stank.
Guillermo Marquez.
The giant Borg gecko. Oh shit. Talking about Scandinavian nationalism. Truth.
This is
Lex Whitfield.
Boom, 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 boom.
Did you say Guillermo Marquez?
Guillermo. Yeah.
Oh, you actually knew how to say it. Shit.
It's the French for well, I might be Portuguese, but it's French for William.
Okay. Oh yeah, Guillermo. Okay, got it.
Okay, let's sign off, and we'll see you all next week. I have another organ drinking story, which I'll tell you again.
Oh my god! Stay tuned.
That's the fire.
Yeah, stay tuned for revolutionary. 18th Brumaire reading series and Tom O'Brien's story hour.
Ciao.